Thank you, Chairman Graham, and thank you, Administrator Green, for testifying today and for your continued service to our nation over so many years and so many roles. I think you've made a genuine contribution to our country and to the world. Although you did not craft it, I just have to begin by saying it is deeply frustrating to me that yet again the Trump administration has ignored the will of Congress and submitted a budget request nearly identical to last year's request, which was rejected robustly on a bipartisan and bicameral effort by Congress. Proposed cuts overall of more than 30%, and in some accounts 50% or even 100%, threaten to reverse bipartisan progress on development and diplomacy, weaken our global standing, and threaten our national security. I am grateful to Chairman Graham and Ranking Member Leahy, to Paul Grove and Tim Reeser of this subcommittee for their determined and bipartisan work to reverse these proposed cuts and to instead find a solid footing with which we can move forward. So I will continue to work with my colleagues to support a bipartisan and robust development and diplomacy budget, which I think is critical for our international leadership and to meet the complex and multiple crises, Mr. Administrator, which you've already spoken to. A record number of displaced people around the world, a record number of man-made conflicts, a lot of fragile states, and a lot of just appalling humanitarian crises. So I want to speak about a specific area of the world and my concern about over-reliance on security assistance and military operations in fragile contexts, coupled with these proposed significant or even devastating cuts to democracy and development programs that address the root causes of extremism. As I think you know, I just returned from leading a bipartisan congressional delegation to Niger, Burkina Faso, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. On October 4th of last year, 4 U.S. soldiers were killed in Niger, which may have been the first time most Americans were conscious that we have hundreds of troops in Niger. But we are also doing important development work and work to support multi-party democracy in both Niger and Burkina Faso. What do you think are the real drivers of extremism in the Sahel? And how do you think the President's proposed budget for USAID and State Department will either succeed or fail in addressing these root causes?
Thank you, Senator. With respect to the Sahel, I think there are a number of drivers of extremism. This is an area that is prone to acute climactic shocks, as we've known. Recurring drought has been a challenge. Weak governance has been a challenge. What we have started to do at USAID and in the interagency is begin to take a new look at how we might approach the Sahel. So step number one that we've undertaken is to map out where we do have existing programs. We have programs particularly in the area of global health in many parts of the region and some of our food security programs. We've also had conversations just last week with our French counterparts. The French have a deep interest and a long history in much of the Sahel, so we're exploring ways to work with them so that we don't duplicate but can complement our work, because I think our interests are largely aligned. And the same thing is true conversations that we've had with DFID. We had a strategic dialogue with DFID not so long ago. But I think we're looking at programs, regional programs that promote economic growth, that build the capacity of local governments, but also going country by country and doing a deep dive analysis of what those drivers of extremism are. As you and I have talked about before, they're often localized factors, and so we want to take a smart, careful approach and try to address those head on. But,
thank you. Let me just ask one more question, if I might, in the 2 minutes I have left.
Sure.
Just to bear down on that just a little bit more, given significant increase in terrorist activity, particularly in Burkina Faso and in Niger, but over the last 5 years in Mali as well, the administration pledged $60 million to support a 5-country G5 Sahel Joint Force Initiative on top of other security assistance, and a number of our other security partners you just referenced are also going to be engaged. What plans do you have for the development side of the G5 Sahel Initiative, and how do we better coordinate between the defense side and the diplomacy and the development side, particularly in countries where I think the key towards making progress is sustaining fragile democracies and sustaining development progress, particularly in the north of these countries that tends to be isolated from the majority south of these countries?
I think we need to take on, as you point to, questions of governance, particularly youth engagement and governance. In many of these countries, the youth bulge is significant. The median age is young. Young people see a lack of economic opportunity, but just as importantly, a disillusionment with governing structures. And so I think part of the approach that we need to take is helping governments to engage with and listen to young people. We're trying to address some of the recurring costs of climate shocks. So in a place like Ethiopia, for example, we've seen a lot of success in building the resilience of communities to withstand recurring drought. Same sorts of challenges are appearing throughout the region. That's an area where we're seeking to foster our work and strengthen it. And then, of course, as we've been talking about in the area of global health as well.
Well, I'll just close by saying I think there are good development stories in the region. I was struck that Burkina Faso has made a greater path of progress towards reducing HIV/AIDS prevalence than any other country on the continent, and is sharing the burden with the United States. MCC, as Millennium Challenge Compacts, have had real positive impacts in these two countries. Yep. And we continue to have, as you mentioned, both public health and power partnerships, development partnerships, with now democratically elected presidents of both countries. My hope is that we will have a tightly articulated, developed diplomacy and development component to this, as well as the defense side to it. Thank you for your testimony and for your work, and I very much look forward to working with Chairman Graham in making sure we're investing these funds wisely this coming year. Thank you.